Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us, and I hope all of you are having a wonderful day as we get things kicked off here with, of course, Mike Cermak, and he is our guest today. He is a regular correspondent, been here for, wow, actually probably longer than I have. So, yeah, Mike Cermak joining us, techguy.org. That is our go-to site whenever people, we run into problems that we can't help people with. We, of course, direct them over there because, the minds of the many are much, much, much smarter than the minds of the few. So, yeah, with that being said, he's joining us, and we're going to be talking about a number of things. And at the top of the list, a couple of, I guess the best way to put it would be big missteps from big companies. And we're going to start out with Intel because that is the newest. And then also we're going to cover Apple, where I think, because that one did hit most of the other news networks kind of deals. But, we've been on break for the last, 10 days or so. So we haven't really had a chance to cover that. So we really wanted to make sure that you knew your options when it comes to iPhones and the whole battery thing. So with that being said, we are, before we get started, let's go over computeramerica.com. That has the show notes, links to all of our guest websites, any articles that we do. Everything and anything can be found at computeramerica.com. Also, be sure to check out the social media contest brought to you by, not Intel, Logitech. There we go. And we'll be giving away a prize this Friday. And then the last thing is, of course, the video portion where you can watch Computer America and not just listen. Sorry about that. Ooh, frog in my throat. So, where you can watch Computer America and not just listen, and you'll be able to follow along in the articles with us. We'll show demonstration videos where applicable. We'll do, a little bit of the legwork for you. We're still a radio show, but it's another feature that we'd like to add. So, with all that being said, we're going to go ahead and bring Mike on and get to talking because, it's, some huge news stories, and especially the Intel one. So, once again, techguy.org, it's a one-stop shop and really a forum. Do you remember those? Yeah, that's how people used to connect. A forum for all things computer and, hobbyists, enthusiasts, help, or just want to talk to people with similar interests. Mike, welcome onto the show, and how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, and again, I hope all the whole Christmas thing went well for you. The New Year, everything. No one hung over. Everyone good?
Everyone's great. Christmas is much more exciting when you have a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old.
I bet you. So
they keep you on your toes. That's for sure.
I bet, and well, I have to ask this. Hopefully, they're not listening. But I hope that they are. But I hope that they're not. And did Santa come?
Santa did come. Santa was very generous to them. They might be a little bit spoiled.
That's a good thing, though. That is definitely a good thing. and just as a very quick aside, probably the 6-year-old. Any inclination in technology, or
yeah, a little bit. He certainly enjoys watching YouTube videos on his iPad.
That is such a huge thing. Like probably the tween, like before teen and teen market, they're so huge into YouTube. I don't get it. Like they see something that has millions of dollars of production value,
right?
In television, and they're like, that's not for me. And then they see someone with a webcam talking to them, and they're like, this is perfect. This is just what I wanted.
And it's ridiculous because there's some of these videos that are just kids that are, opening boxes of toys. And that's it. And these families are making millions of dollars through YouTube with these stupid videos that kids just love to watch, including mine.
Unboxing videos, those are still hugely important. Absolutely.
I know, even to a 6-year-old.
Yeah, unboxing videos and Minecraft tutorials. Those are probably 30% of what YouTube is nowadays. So
What happened to the good old cat videos?
they're still there as
Back
well.
in my day,
You know,
we watched cat videos.
cat videos are still there, but what I've noticed with YouTube is that people, like, I don't know if they steal them or if they like license them from people who originally put them up, but they put them into like, I kid you not, hour-long compilation videos of like 10-second cat clips
I
and
always wondered what you did in your
millions.
spare time.
Absolutely. Who else? Well, okay, but we're off topic. So, Mike, welcome back onto the show. You join us and you talk about some of the more technical side and things that catch your interest, and of course would catch the interest of our audience. So, one thing that you brought to our attention, and I was probably going to pick it up because you linked to 3 different articles. I found like 6 different ones as well. This
Uh-huh.
is really catching fire today, and for good reason. So I'll let you go. Intel, they're huge, and what happened? Because this is, some said this is the biggest flaw in like 20 years.
Yeah, it's a big deal for sure. So it kind of just hit the news here last night and this morning. There it seems to be a defect or a bug in the design of some Intel chips, practically all of them over almost 10 years, that has been discovered. And basically, it allows an attacker to potentially get into parts of the CPU that they shouldn't be able to get into. Intel hasn't made an official statement on exactly the way that that attack can work or what it can do yet. There's a lot of speculation as to as to how it works, coincidentally concerning speculation and the way processors try to figure out what command you're going to want it to do next, is possibly related to it. But we don't know exactly yet. But what we do know is that it's a big deal because it basically allows them to get into your computer and do almost anything, read parts of the memory it shouldn't be able to read and run processes it shouldn't be able to run. It's a big deal and affects any operating system, whether they're running Linux or Windows or Mac. If it's running an Intel CPU, at this point, it's very suspect that it could be affected by this.
Well, yeah, and we should talk about who's affected because I think you said any I believe you said any CPU manufactured in the last 10 years,
Yeah,
right?
about that. Almost any Intel x86 chip, and that's a lot of devices out there.
That is,
I mean,
and that
if your
spans,
computer has an Intel chip in it, it's
yeah,
very likely it's going to be affected by this.
and that spans Mac, Linux, Windows. This is something a little bit more based than the operating system itself, right? This is very very crucial,
Yep.
to all these systems. So, and I was reading because so let's talk about kind of, or hopefully you have a little bit of insight. But as I understand it, it was something with a flaw in, I think it was like the page isolation, something like that,
Right.
and it's like I guess undiagnosed or unpatched or
Discovered.
whatever. Well, yeah, or even undiscovered. Um, it was. This is mainly a security fix, but as I understand it, when they fix it, and they have to fix it because you can't let a security flaw like this go. When they do fix it, this is going to have even worse ramifications. Uh, probably for the speed of these processors. Correct? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of what makes it so bad. Like it's not just, oh, we found a flaw and we're going to fix it. This is, we found a flaw and it's so integral to what these processors do that when we do fix it, it's going to change your processor.
That's right, or at least the way that your computer talks to your processor.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a kernel, process in your computer in whatever operating system you're using, which is like a low level. All of the other applications build on top of it, and it protects itself and protects, applications from reading each other's private information, and just kind of oversees everything. But there's some issue in it, and there's been some speculation that I've read that it may be related to the way this speculative memory works. That a CPU, runs as fast as it can, and if it doesn't have a command available that it should be running, Intel and other manufacturers try to guess what the next command will be that you're going to ask it to do, and run that just so that it can seem even faster than what it really is, which is great technology. I mean, it's amazing. But supposedly, from what I've been reading, it's related to that you can get some code injected in there that will run before the security parts of the process check it first. And so that's kind of the issue. So you can get into the kernel memory and start reading things that you shouldn't be allowed to read. Uh, and and so to fix that, they really have to change the way parts of the process work, especially related um, to that kernel. And the estimates right now, it varies a great deal on how much it's going to slow down your computer, but it will slow down the computer. Some estimates say 30%, some estimates say 10%. Either way, it's not insignificant.
Right. No, and
You know,
and
it's
these processors, I mean, for a home user, you're probably going to notice a 10% if you've been pushing your processor to its limits. If you haven't, maybe there's some wiggle room there, and you may not notice it as much. But these processors, they are used in many different applications on business side. Where think
right.
about Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud or things like this, where these operations that happen behind the scenes. Imagine everything that you do on every service on Amazon Web Services suddenly got 30% slower.
Right.
That's a big deal, right?
That's exactly right. And you can just imagine how big that issue is. If you have one computer and it runs, say 10% slower, maybe the average user will notice it, maybe they won't. And it depends very much on what they're doing with the computer. Surfing the web, you're less likely to notice it. If you're doing some more, intense lower level, processing, then you're more likely to use it. So depends very much on what the use case is. But, you can imagine one computer running 10% slower versus, Google or Microsoft or Amazon, who has thousands upon thousands of servers. If, thousands of computers suddenly run 10% slower, that's a big deal because all of a sudden we need 10% more computers now. Or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean and it's not quite that easy to do. I mean, you can't just flip a switch. It's going to be a big deal. Just before we went on air here, Intel actually just released a statement on it,
Or did they?
saying that they wanted to make a note. They were planning to announce this bug, and they still will next week after some of the security updates have had a chance to be sent out, and that they don't want to get into too much detail about it until
Yeah.
manufacturers have had a chance to catch up on it.
Yeah, eh,
Um,
that
but
that that was, and just quick. I mean, that was one part of this was that everyone is covering it because this is certainly a big deal for Intel, but they haven't really explained exactly how to do it and how to replicate it. I'm sure that information has been shared with Microsoft and Amazon and things like that, but yeah, it's still currently really unpatched, and I guess they don't want people taking advantage of that at the.
That's exactly right. And that's why we're speculating a little bit about exactly how it works and so on. We expect to know a lot more about it here next week when the official announcement comes from Intel. One thing interesting in the Intel statement today, though, it says that that these Intel believes these exploits do not have the potential to corrupt, modify, or delete data. And again, we believe that it just allows them to read areas of the memory they shouldn't be allowed to read, and that it is not a bug or flaw unique to Intel products. They believe that it affects many different processors from different vendors and operating systems.
That is certainly something like I don't know if that's marketing speak because
Right?
a lot of the articles that you linked and a lot of other people are of course mentioning that what's bad for Intel in a lot of cases is good for AMD. AMD in the last year or so has really tried to strike back and try to become more competitive, and so any downturn in Intel's reputation or any trouble Intel has, AMD is quick to step up and go, hey, look, we don't have this problem. So for Intel to come out and say that, oh, it's not just us, this is something, uh, much more base than even Intel products. It's a problem with just, it seems like they're saying this is a problem with CPUs at a very core level. And I mean, one of the articles that you linked here says that AMD jumped 7% in
Mhm.
pre-market trading. Do you think that AMD is really affected and they're just not saying, or do you think AMD doesn't know if they really are and they're kind of not saying anything?
Well, and an engineer at AMD made a statement saying that their processors are not affected by this bug. So I don't know. It's we'll have to wait and see. I suspect what it is that Perhaps they need to do some different way of designing them to begin with, just to make sure this type of attack isn't possible. Maybe this specific one doesn't affect AMD, but it may highlight, the possibility of, some other attack that might be possible through it. I'm just guessing at this point. I don't know. It's interesting the way Intel kind of called them out there. I mean, not by name, but
Right.
but then in the next sentence, they say Intel is committed to product and customer satisfaction as working with other technology companies, including AMD. And so they are kind of calling out them and saying they are working with them about this type of issue. I
Well,
suspect this specific attack is for Intel only, but I think in a broader sense, that type of attack may still be possible.
right. Well, I mean, Intel and AMD, they actually did partner up to make something. Maybe it was like faster processors or something like, or maybe in graphics cards. But they have been working together. It's not like Intel and AMD. Like, I think people who are fans of these two companies hate each other more than the two companies actually do.
I
Um,
think you're right.
yeah, they actually do work together, and even though they're seen as competitors, they know that any advancement in the field is probably better for both companies. So, but at the same time, I mean, there are other manufacturers out there, but most of the other chip manufacturers, if not Intel and AMD, they're mobile processors. Do you think this affects mobile CPUs as well? Because it most certainly could, right?
Well, it could, but I don't think that it does. Everything I've heard says that it affects the x86-64 architecture, and that's not really, usually you
Okay.
see ARM processors or other things like that on mobile devices. I haven't heard anything suggesting that it could affect mobile devices, but if this type of attack in a broader sense could be done, in theory to other processors, it's certainly possible. I'm sure they're reevaluating every processor design now.
So, and even though this is something obviously, people are breaking this about Intel. Intel is not specifically the one to actually fix this. So, the statement, I actually just found it here. Let's put it up on the video. Yeah, and in the statement here, they have it where Intel recommends that you update any updates from your operating system instead of, Intel is not going to push out an update into your system. It's going to come through your OS provider, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, the security updates will come from whoever your OS provider is, whether that's Apple or Microsoft or some variation of Linux. And there are updates already available for Linux. Kernel page table isolation updates is what they call
I
them.
expected nothing less.
Yes, right. Yeah, those guys are on it. And of course, they're oftentimes Linux machines are used as web servers. Most web servers are Linux machines, and that's where you're starting to see these reports of it slowing down computers. And so, if you don't use your computer as a server, which most people don't, you may not see as much of a difference. But it's still, there's going to be some people who are not going to be very happy about that.
Well, and you can read the writing on the wall. Obviously, we're just a computer technology show that covers news, but I can already see that because I just recently bought one of these chips, and I think most people out there, if you have bought a computer, you have purchased an Intel CPU in the past 10 years, and class action. I mean, if you're going to, uh, maybe there's going to be some small class action for the security feature of it, but if they actually, well, not if this has to be patched. If you are currently using a CPU and they throttle it back by 10 to 30%, you're not getting the product that you paid for, and it's not your fault. So, you know, I'm expecting probably in the next year or two, there's going to be some major repercussions to this because, you know, this is something that class action is kind of made to do to fix the wrongs of large companies. I'm not saying that Intel, that they did this maliciously. There's nothing here so
No.
far to indicate this, but damages are definitely done.
Yeah, well, and especially if it's for larger companies like the ones we've mentioned before. I mean, they have huge investments in processors and servers, and to have that suddenly be 10% less effective, just picking a number out of the air, is not small to them. I mean, that's a major issue, and yeah, we'll have to see how it all comes out, but it's going to be a big deal, and people are going to be getting updates for this, in short order. I expect it's a pretty big issue.
Right. So Intel obviously came out with a statement. This seems like they're going to come out with a bigger one next week. So we'll definitely cover that on the show when they do. But at the moment, I mean, I think that's about all we know. And I think from a security point of view, it's probably not something you really need to concern yourself with. Like you said, I mean, when there are users such as this is a security flaw with Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure Cloud, Google, whatever Google's is called. I mean, when there are big fish like that are vulnerable to this, your family photos are probably not that interesting in the grand scheme of things. So from a security point of view, don't worry about it too much. Update when you can.
Right.
But this is going to
Yeah,
be an
that's the
ongoing thing.
biggest thing to do. I mean, long term, the fix for this is going to be to install the update, which the way it's going to, separate these tables is going to slow down the computer a little bit, but that is the fix. And you would rather have a computer that runs a little bit slower than one that is susceptible to major attacks like this. I mean, that's really, if that's the compromise you have to make, that's the compromise you have to make. Uh, but uh, but in the meantime, just normal malware, antivirus, best practices. Don't open up programs unless you're confident of where they've come from. Don't go randomly installing every freeware program you can find. Just use good practice like you should anyway.
If you see a pop-up ad or an email saying that we have an update for your x86 architecture processor, do not install that. That's probably not what you want to do. So
That's great advice, Ben. It really is, because very often that happens when a big security update
that's
like
true.
this comes out. That's the scammers will use that though, and it's hard to differentiate between which one is real and which one isn't.
Right. And again, just to drive it home, it's going to come through Microsoft. It's going to come through Apple. It's going to be through, whoever manages your Linux distribution. It's going to come through them. So
And it's going
don't.
to come through just like every other update does. I mean, you may get a different. Yeah, it's not like you're going to go somewhere special to get it.
And it may come on a Thursday instead of a Tuesday, but
Right.
Hey, it's going
But
to be
you're not
so
going to go to some weird, crazy website to get it and
right.
download and get a warning when you try to open it. This
Right.
is, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely. And I'm glad that we were able to cover that because that's definitely something that's going to be huge for the weeks to come. But the other story, and if you don't mind, I want to move on because, as I mentioned before the show, folks, we've been on break for the past, for the past 10 days, and it's been lovely. I've gotten more beauty rest than ever before. It has not helped, and it's been good, but things have been happening besides what we do here on the show, and one of them is Apple. And hey, Mike, did you know that Apple makes phones? It's true.
No way.
Yeah, they make phones. They're pretty popular. Um, and yeah, people expect them to work pretty darn well. And Apple recently got in trouble. If anyone out there has been living under a rock, Apple got in trouble because of something that, and I'll let you take over, Mike, but this is something people have been assuming or guessing, or, like at least they kind of had a gut feeling, but it took someone doing some detective work to finally say that, yes, this is what Apple is doing. And so we'll talk about, kind of the rumors, how this started, and then and we'll talk about, kind of if this was right or wrong, because it's pretty interesting. And then we'll talk about what Apple is doing to fix it.
Yeah, well, and so there's always been a bit of a subset of people who felt that whenever the new iPhone comes out, all of a sudden the old ones are slower. It's one of those things where they all just kind of feel a little bit slower when the new one comes out. And I know people who have the theory that Apple, does that intentionally to increase the number of people who are interested in buying a new iPhone. And there's interesting, people who've created graphs that correlate when a new iPhone comes out and the number of people Googling, that their iPhone is slow. But it's hard to figure out what the cause and what the effect is there. But what they have discovered is, in fact, older iPhones were running slower than what they used to. And they could actually figure that, see that that was really happening. Some older iPhones were running slower than what they should have been, and came to discover that what Apple was doing was, in one of the iOS updates, they added the code that for an older iPhone that has a battery that doesn't have as much capacity as it once did, a worn out battery, that it would slow down the processor, thus making everything on the phone run a little bit slower, but allowing it to run longer and allow that battery to last a little bit longer. I think the biggest issue with this is not so much that they did that, because that is not an unreasonable thing to do. I mean, batteries age. Anyone who has any device with a battery, whether it's a cell phone or a laptop or whatever, knows that after a couple of years, these lithium-ion batteries are just abused so much that they don't hold a charge like they used to. And there's a lot of reasons for that: heat and being overcharged and
And
lots
just
of things. But
just general life cycles. The fact that you drain them and recharge them so many times, these batteries have a set lifespan. So
that's
right.
right, absolutely right. And they're not we don't really take good care of our batteries in our cell phones because, lithium-ion batteries, it's not great for them to be charged at 100% and sat that way like my phone is every night when I plug it in at night,
Me too.
by
Yeah.
by 2 or 3 a.m. it's fully charged and sits there plugged in. And yeah, that's not the optimal way to handle batteries. And of course, they get hot and they get cold and so they're not going to last forever. But yeah, so that's not a surprise. But what was kind of surprising is that Apple really kind of did this sort of secretly. There was not any big public announcement that they were going to start slowing down phones to make them last longer, which, like I said, is not an unreasonable thing to do. And people are kind of PO'd about that. We only found out about it because some people figured it out, not because Apple told us.
Well, yeah.
And
And
yeah,
I mean, just real quick, that was certainly the part of it because I've seen people doing other detective work and they've done things like, searching Google and they use code words such as, why is my iPhone, 5S or 4 running slower? And those peaked at times when a new operating system came out, or they peaked when a new iPhone came out. Usually they're tied together.
right,
And part of that is you can account that to uh, kind of thinking that may be the case because hey, you have an old iPhone, a new one just came out, you just feel like it's slower. But
right,
part of this is exactly what Apple has admitted to, which is they throttled back the CPU so that your battery. In some cases, Apple was saying that they did this because in older phones, new operating systems they weren't optimized for them, and it was actually causing them to unexpectedly crash, break your phone, and otherwise just be unusable. And so Apple took it upon themselves instead of, and this is, I think this is what you were starting to get at, Mike, where they did this to preserve the quality of their phones. You take away some processing power, but at least they stay on, and at least they stay charged. Hey, for a reasonable amount of time, but they are slower. And I think a lot of people took that and they say, planned obsolescence. This is Apple, poking these people with a stick, saying, "Hey, get the new phone. Your old one is slow, artificially so, but it's slow." And I don't know how much weight that really holds because yes, people are going to want a new phone if their phone is slower, but you can see why Apple did it. They weren't completely unjustified in throttling these phones.
right. No, they definitely weren't. I think the biggest issue was just that it was done secretly,
Yeah.
that they didn't communicate that they were going to start doing that, especially since they didn't do that originally, that it was a feature that was, kind of added into an iOS update, and people didn't know that it would suddenly, doing so would slow down their phone. It would, give them better battery life and more and a better experience with the phone in all, I'd say, because it's more reliable.
They could have
But
they could have turned this into such a positive, but but
they
instead
could have.
they did it so secretly, and it was a huge
I think they
misstep.
didn't expect people to figure it out, but I mean, yeah, it really sounds bad.
And just a quick, Mike, we're about to head into the break here in about 30 seconds, but I did just want to
Uh-huh.
say that when we come back, we'll talk about the fact that it's not just, and here's why it's not so easy to say that Apple is slowing down old phones so people upgrade, is that if you actually did pay for a replacement battery, which is a pretty, a pretty simple, I was about to say procedure, like it's some kind of doctor, but replace the battery, and the operating system, the code checks the battery, kind of life cycle, and it says, all right, you can handle, the full extent of this iOS, and it speeds your phone back up. If you replace the battery, you get your old fast phone back. And that's why
Right.
it's not as simple as, we're slowing down all 5Ss. No, only ones with bad batteries. So Mike, again, with the music there, we're going to come right back and we'll talk about what Apple is doing to make this right. But everyone else out there, Computer America, we'll be right back. Mike Cermak, techguy.org. Everyone, check out the show notes. We'll be right back.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 31 minutes past the hour as we continue on here doing, hey, we're talking about Apple. Folks, this is, no really new revelations have come out because, again, we were on break and we're just simply, kind of covering what has happened and now what Apple is doing to fix it. But joining us again, Mike Cermak, techguy.org, check it out. And yeah, Mike, so Apple, they did a no-no, and really the no-no that, I was just talking to someone listening to the show, and, I can't really read what they said on the air because there's a lot of curse words, but essentially it boiled down to, I just finished paying off this stupid phone, and now it's slower, and, I wish I had I wish I had the full extent to what I paid for, but it's this throttling issue that, is really throwing people. So, so again, they throttled it to improve battery life. If you simply replace the battery, the processor speed cranks back up and you are good to go. But Apple gave no indication that, and by the way, that was independently tested as well. They tested old phones and they found the slowdown, and then they tested old phones with replaced batteries, and that was what led to people actually finding out about this. So if you do replace the battery, independently verified, it does speed back up. So what is Apple doing for this? Because they're, and like, I know Apple is nigh untouchable. They are sitting on the largest stack of free money that anyone has ever sat on before. And, they seem like a gangster who knows they got caught, and then they say, all right, well, just pay me a bit more money and I'll take care of that problem for you. Like, so please, Mike, what are they doing to fix this?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, and what they have done is they've reduced the cost to replace the battery for an iPhone that's out of warranty. It's usually $79 to replace the battery, and now they're reducing it down to $29 through the end of the year. So they're knocking $50 off of the price. $29 is not a bad price to have a battery replaced.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Like, it honestly, Apple is probably eating the cost of labor, and it's probably at cost for the batteries. Apple obviously doesn't want to be hurt too bad if they really had to replace every old battery. And I think they said this goes back to like Apple 5S's or maybe even 5s. Anything before that, really they just don't work anymore anyways. So yeah, and they're replacing all these batteries. Like, they don't want to, have to pay millions and hundreds of millions of dollars to replace these batteries. Do you think this is something that people should, maybe do? Because this offer does extend for a year.
Yeah, it ends at the end of the year. I would say if you have an iPhone 6, and especially if you feel like it's underperforming, it's definitely worth going out to your Apple store if you have one nearby and paying $29 to get a new battery. I mean, even if it wasn't slowing you down, batteries age, so $29 for a new battery is not a bad deal, especially legitimate one through Apple, not some questionable third party battery.
I've definitely dealt with those, and and I definitely read somewhere that someone recommended that if you were interested in this and you have a newer phone, like let's say an iPhone 7 or even a 6S or something like that, one thing that you could probably do just to kind of, I don't want to say game the system, but if you're not really noticing that much of a performance issue, maybe consider replacing the battery in a couple of months, maybe towards
Yeah.
the end of the year,
I
because
mean,
then,
what?
yeah, right,
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. Just don't forget about it. Put it on your calendar and don't
right.
wait until December. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if you can wait a little bit longer, then that battery's going to last even longer, going forward, the new one will. The other thing that Apple announced is that beginning very soon here in the next month or two, they're going to have an update that will make it more open to the user. They'll be able to see on the phone that this is happening, that your phone is being slowed down because your battery is dead, and give you more information, more visibility into the health of the battery, which is really what they should have done to begin with.
That seems like something that probably Apple retailers could do on their own with diagnostic tools. Apple obviously likes to hide a lot of their diagnostic and system information, behind a very pretty operating system. They don't want they don't want big numbers and scary codes to scare people away from their easy to use interface, but really some transparency in what they're offering is really probably the best thing they could have done and should have done from the beginning. Um, is this, do you think that Apple, kind of going forward, do you think they're going to be more open with us, or do you think this, is just one of a couple
No.
things that they hide from us?
No, I'm not convinced they will. I'm not sure that they've really learned their lesson. I think they're covering this pretty well. But I mean, how difficult would it have been to have, even if it were relatively hidden away, not necessarily even a big pop-up message, but just when you go into settings and about your phone and so on, just one little line there saying, battery health low, something like that. You don't even have to make it obnoxious or, yeah, just some kind of feedback to people. So I don't know. I don't understand why they had to do it so secretively the way that they did. I suspect they were just worried about negative press. If it did come out and say, "Hey, we're slowing down phones that have bad batteries in them," they'd be like, "Oh, iPhones are getting slowed down." But this looks much worse.
Yeah, and really, like that's all it would take would be a simple opt out option where it says, and like my computer or my laptops had this where with the battery life you could put it into a couple different settings. You could put maximum performance. It would drain the battery like crazy, but it
Right.
would also hey, make sure everything runs tip top speed. If you're playing games, it's great. You could put power saver if you're just using it for traveling and answering emails. Power saver, you didn't need the speed, and it extended the life of the battery to multiple hours. Like settings like that, if Apple had just made it an opt out, like not even an opt in, but an opt out, they would not be in trouble right now. But
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
and it's not like giving feedback about the battery health is something unique about this. If you go to, my MacBook, for example, it has a warning up at the top of the screen that says the battery health is bad and I should replace the battery. I don't understand why, if it's doing that to my MacBook, then why can't we just have something similar on the iPhone?
I think Apple has definitely heard loud and clear, and they're going to do that exact thing now. And folks, if you want a new battery, I believe you just go through apple.com.
Right.
You just type into Google, Apple iPhone replacement battery, whatever. And yeah, you send it in, takes a couple days, they send it back, and it's $29. So again, maybe want to wait a little longer if you're not really seeing it, but you can send it in right now and take advantage of that. Yeah, and
And
Apple,
the other advantage of waiting a little bit longer is that you won't be in the lines of everyone else trying to get their batteries replaced right now.
right, right, yeah, I'm sure that they're probably inundated, with larger orders of people, kind of doing it right away. But so there's that $29. Apple deservedly got knocked for this, and they're trying to make it right, but yeah, it just goes to show that even for companies with a pretty good reputation for good hardware, they'll hide things from you. They'll hide things that you think that you don't need to know, and yeah, this is just super interesting to kind of watch unfold. So, anyways, there's Apple. We did not cover it again. No new revelations. Just really wanted to lay that out there because again, hey, we were on break. So with that being said, we have a couple more articles here, and actually one of them, it like I actually did want to mention this because if you don't mind, Mike, if we could talk about the apps that request the use of your microphone even though they don't need them, and then they target advertising through what they pick up through the microphone, and this is through Android apps. And this was such a weird thing because again, it's not really a security flaw from what I could read. I was kind of flipping through it. And yeah, I thought that maybe you'd like to comment on the fact that, hey, we all download apps. We download many, many of them. I have, I actually keep pretty bare, but I have probably about 20 apps. And, sometimes they ask for permissions, and I'm a little hesitant. I'm a little hesitant that, this app for, I don't know, doing something benign is asking to use my camera. It doesn't
Right.
make much sense. So, did you have a chance to read this article? And
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, I had heard about this happening, and that's exactly right. So whenever you install the app, it comes up with the app permissions, and one of those permissions was to use the microphone, and then it listened for different things to try to target the advertising a little bit, at least in theory. I'm not sure how useful it was just yet, but it was a nice proof of concept sort of thing. And then freaked people out a little bit with the idea that it's listening to them all the time, and I can understand why. But you're exactly right that you have to be cautious. That's why we have these permissions that come up and tell you what that app is going to be allowed to do. And you do want to look at those. People just instinctively hit OK, allow, and
well,
move on and don't
they,
even read it and don't wonder, gee, I wonder why this, painting app needs my location and access to my address book and access to
right.
my, it's like uh, there's very specific permissions for specific reasons, and sometimes they're legitimate reasons, but you want to be a little suspicious, especially if it's not a big, well-known app. Especially if it's just something that only a
That's
thousand or people have downloaded. That's all the
oh
more reason to be a little suspicious and more cautious.
oh for sure. And that was but I've also seen people do the flip side of it, where like let's take a game like Pokemon Go. I tried to get I tried to get maybe my brother to download it, I think, to play it. And, Pokemon Go, everyone had it on their phone. If it was malicious, the civilizations we know it would have crumbled because everyone had it. This was one, though, that, like, he installed it. And it's like, we need access to your camera, your microphone, your location, and a couple of other things. And he's like,
Hmm.
this is asking me for too many permissions. And I'm like, it needs your camera to show you the Pokemon. It needs your location to show you which Pokemon. It needs, there's legitimate reasons,
Right.
but some people are just very cautious. And I think this is one of the first validations where, this wasn't really, well named apps. I think this was more, kind of little rip off cheesy apps from the Android store. But
Right.
this is one of the first times that those, does it really need it, was probably justified, which made it kind of important.
There was whenever my bank first launched their app, and it's a relatively small regional bank, it had just by default a ton of requests for permissions, and it wanted my location. Okay, maybe I could understand that. It wanted access to my phone book, my contact list, and I was like, I don't know about that. And it wanted to be able to have access to the list of all of the apps I have installed, and it had, I forget what the other ones were. It had all these weird permissions. I was like, yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't
That's
think
a
my
lot.
bank needs all that information. Like, and then they fixed that in a subsequent update. It was just a matter of the programmer had hit the wrong boxes for stuff that they needed to request. But it's, you should read them. It's you should look at that and think about it. And you're right. Most of the time, there's going to be legitimate reasons, just like Pokemon Go, to have them. But think about it for a minute
Yeah.
and be a little skeptical.
Right. Yeah. Skeptical, it will take you far. And, as much as I think people don't read the end user license agreement, I think
I don't.
reading, I definitely don't either. But as much as, we don't read those, I think those little notifications are, pretty easy to, either say yes or no to. So with that being said, we have a couple of other articles. I think some of them are pretty darn interesting. And Mike, I'll go ahead and let you decide, as our guests, which one of these kind of caught your
Well,
interest?
you know I've got to mention SpaceX. I
Oh, of
mean,
course.
I was working so hard to try and find some Tesla tie because every month when I come on, I have to mention Tesla somehow. So I've definitely got to go to SpaceX. By the way, I need to mention Santa brought my son a book called Elon Musk. This book is about rockets, and it's a children's book for my 6-year-old, and it's just one of the best children's books I've ever read, and I highly recommend it. Folks should go out and look at that. It's on Amazon, and it's just outstanding. It talks about
Suitable
Elon's life, and it's perfect for kids.
suitable for all ages, like kids of all ages. That's
It
what they say.
really is. Have you seen it?
I have not, but I think I remember him writing, or I don't know if he wrote it or if he had it
He did
commissioned,
not.
but
Yeah, well, and I've read
yeah,
his biography before, but this is a children's book. Elon Musk, this book is about rockets, and it's funny, and it talks about him being bullied as a kid and getting over it and learning from things, and about the rockets exploding when he first tried, and not giving up. And it's just a great, great book. Anyhow,
yeah,
speaking of rockets, SpaceX, which Elon Musk owns, has is preparing to launch their giant rocket, the Falcon Heavy rocket.
yeah. And you didn't say like I don't know if people out there, well, I'm sure they do. Tool time home improvement, I think, with Tim Allen, and that grunt he makes, whenever he does something manly, like when you say Falcon Heavy rocket compared to what SpaceX has been doing before, you need to make that grunt when you mention the Falcon Heavy. This thing is a monster.
More
It's huge.
power.
Exactly, it's huge.
This thing is huge. It says that it has 5 million pounds of thrust at liftoff, which is equivalent to approximately 18 747 aircrafts.
Yeah, I think they said this was the most thrust that they've kind of or that anyone has used since the Saturn IX uh, rockets back in the 60s or something like that. And this does not look like something from the 60s. This is not big and bulky. This is kind of slim. Everything's all painted white. Looks very well SpaceX-ish. And yeah, it can deliver a very very large payload. Did you hear what Elon Musk wanted to send into space on the Falcon Heavy?
Of course, yes, he wants to send, of all things, a Tesla.
Not just any Tesla, his Tesla, and he's sending it to Mars.
Yeah, he's going to put it not on the surface of Mars, but in orbit around Mars. A Tesla Roadster, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was his Roadster. He has it. If you look at if you look at the video of the Falcon Heavy, you can see it on the video portion. If you're watching, they have a very cool drone video that they put out of it on the launch pad. I believe they're doing some testing, and then I think in like 2 weeks they're actually going to send it up. But yeah, this thing is like they're sending it up. It's going to be in orbit. And I remember someone tweeted at Elon Musk, and they're like, Elon, if I find your Tesla, can I keep it? And he's like, yeah, sure, go for it.
I think his reply was just yes.
Right,
If you can recover the Tesla that's floating in orbit around Mars, you can keep it.
right. So yeah, and they said, let's see, a billion year elliptical Mars orbit. So it's going to be up there for quite a while until someone does retrieve it. And this thing's just super cool. I mean, it's gonna be used to lift bigger, heavier things, probably for the International Space Station, bigger satellites, things like that. But it's yet another step towards the idea of space tourism because you're gonna need to be able to take heavy things up into space.
Yes, that's exactly it. And then this thing was designed, with taking people to Mars in mind. I mean, that's the idea. They built it to be able to take up other heavy things into space, but in the long term, this design is meant to last for a while and be able to be used to take things and people to Mars.
I wonder how reusable it is because that was a mark of the SpaceX Falcon rockets was
Right.
the first stage would come back and land back on the ships. Those are the ones that you see blowing up sometimes. Those come right back. I wonder how much of this rocket is designed to come right back and be recovered.
I believe it is. I believe it is designed to return and recover. I'll have to check and see how much of it. And I wonder exactly how that happens. I assume the three different, stages, the three different components of it probably come back and land individually and then get
Right.
reconnected, I would have bet. But yeah, I'm
Y-
looking at SpaceX's website right now about Falcon Heavy, and just like any other website you might go to, there's a button for pricing information. And in case you were wondering, standard payment for the Falcon Heavy is $90 million for a 2018 launch
You know,
for up to 8 MT. Is that megatons? Yeah.
yeah. So that sounds like that Computer America will shortly be starting a Kickstarter.
Uh-huh.
We are looking to fund sending our offices into space. So yeah, $90 million. I think we can do it. I think we can do it.
We might be able to find enough people who want to, send you into space. 90 million isn't that far of a.
We've had enough of him here. We can send him out there. Give him enough space for his head. That'll be useful. But all right. So Falcon Heavy. This thing is amazing. And again, I mean, just I'm sure that you, Mike, of all people, I'm sure that you saw the video that happened a couple of weeks ago when he launched a rocket at twilight and caused a couple of car accidents and
Yes.
made people sit up and take notice in California. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, was it California or was that Florida? It doesn't matter. It was it's a dash cam video of someone just driving down the highway, and you can see the trail of the rocket launch up in the air, and everyone's like, "Wow, look at that! What is that? It's a rocket! What is it?" And then all of a sudden, all of the cars around them start colliding into one another.
and yeah, it left from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. That was where that one was because I remember the video being from LA traffic, so
Uh-huh.
it was definitely from California.
I,
But
I stand corrected.
yeah, but absolutely, it was like I don't know if it's good or bad that space, that rockets and these spacecrafts have become so routine that people are like, oh, what's that? Oh, is that a rocket going into space? Oh, I didn't even hear about that. I was busy staring at my phone. Like they've become so routine now that it just kind of happens, which is cool.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you don't have an announcement. Everyone wasn't in LA wasn't aware that there was going to be a rocket launch that day. And it is amazing enough though to see in person that it would make you look up from the road and perhaps be a little distracted. So
Right, right.
let this be a lesson to everyone listening. If you're ever driving down the highway and there's a rocket launch in front of you, watch the traffic around you. The
Cool.
rocket is unlikely to hit you, but the
Right.
vehicles around you.
Right. Absolutely. And but with of course with that being said, um I just had a point that I was going to forgot. Anyways, the Falcon Heavy going to be tested. It's going to be really really cool to see what they can do with this. And hey, the 90 million today, maybe in a couple years it'll come down to I don't know, a reasonable 30 million and everything will be good. And everything will be good. So, but with that being said, why don't we have time for one or two more articles? And I'm actually kind of intrigued about this Google one because I had heard about it, and I remember them doing it back a couple of years ago, and they actually went to the Supreme Court over this, and I think Google actually won the court case where. And Mike, I'm kind of looking for a reaction from you because this, you sometimes tend to be high-minded, which definitely like, but people take offense to this in some cases. And yeah, Google has, if you weren't paying attention, has the largest digital library anywhere ever. They have 25 million scanned books, and they're adding truckloads of scanned books every single day. It's something that Google and I believe it was Larry Page or something, or one of the pages. It was his passion project, and he feels that the sum of human knowledge over the past couple thousand years is can be found in books, and the best information can be found in books. So he's scanning them all. But Mike, here's the interesting part. No one's allowed to read them. That was part of the court case that they settled with, is that no one has access to actually read 25 million books. They're scanned, they're ready to go. Distribution is obviously non-existent. And yeah, what do you think about Google, having 25 million books that no one's allowed to read?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you were the author or publisher of one of those books, you could sort of understand their position. I believe the main issue with this was just copyright. That people
Exactly.
want you to go to Amazon and buy their book. They don't want you to go to Google and read it for free.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and that was the core of it. But some and it's so interesting that I don't know, Google is doing this and they were allowed to do this. They're doing it for essentially their search engine, where if you want to type in a passage from a book and then you want to find that book, kind of no one's really going to sit there and type out an entire book just so that your search result comes up positive. Instead, it's going to compare it to what they have scanned, and hey, you're going to be able to find and buy the book that you want. It was just very interesting to me that Google is continuing to do this with no real clear way to make money off of it other than just kind of preserving it for their own records, because like you just said, they can't sell it. The other publishers, they have not made deals. They can't sell these books to their users.
That's right, yeah. But that's not to say that something couldn't happen or they couldn't find some other good use for it. Just like you said, you search for a phrase that's in one of these books and it'll come up in the listings, which could then lead you to buy the book. And I've certainly had that happen where you can see parts of the book and not all of it, and just little segments of it that are highlighted. And if you want the whole thing, you have to pay for it. I mean, it's not unlike what we had with music for the longest time, where people just tried to distribute that online for free, and the publishers said, "Yeah, no, that's not such a great idea," but then came up with an easier way to actually buy it than it was to steal it. And I think we just need to come to terms with the same thing for books, that we should be able to access it the same way. And having that gigantic database of all of the books surely is going to be of some value, even if you can't just hand it out to everybody.
Right, and they're saying that for the, I think they said that they're hoping for libraries who actually do make deals with these publishers and these other these people who actually write these books. I think the one thing that they're hoping to do is that you can give libraries or institutions who make deals access to all of these books, and then any book that they have access to in the physical library, they could then give out a digital, kind of password or digital copy of these books to, their users. And it would kind of be hosted with Google. Google would provide the service, and, the libraries would get free digital copies of every book that is currently sitting on their shelf. It's a really cool idea. And I think people really don't know that Google is doing this, that Google has that many books ready to go that they just can't share.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
I just found that interesting. So we have about a minute, Mike. One quick one. I'll let you kind of decide. Roomba is going to sniff out Wi-Fi weak spots, or ASUS is turning all of their routers, of course made by ASUS, into mesh Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're kind of related stories, aren't they? So if you have an area with bad, Wi-Fi, you can use one of them as a mesh network. We've talked about mesh networks a little bit on the show before, and the idea on it is much like a repeater, that one access point can talk to another, and then you can get access to your Wi-Fi much further away from where your internet is actually plugged in. And in good mesh networks, the devices talk to more than one other access point. So you don't have a single point of failure, and it can go around and spread the bandwidth a little bit as well. So you might have the remote access point that can talk to three other ones that can talk to the main one. And it's interesting. They're going to offer this update so that you can really try and create your own mesh network. You can have several access points all around your house that are talking to one another.
Finally
It'll
turn some of those old Wi-Fi routers that you maybe throw away or donate or whatever you do with them, turn those into maybe secondary access points. And hey, I think it's definitely very, very cool. So Mike, music means that we are just flat out of time. I want to thank you so much for coming on, and if you could tell people what is happening over at techguy.org.
Yeah, well, if you get one of these routers and need help setting it up, or any kind of computer issue, you can head over there to techguy.org, and we're there happy to help. It's a free service. It's a community of people just trying to help one another with computer problems.
Yeah, it's just that simple. So everyone, we have a link to that in the show notes. We have a link to everything else we've talked about in the show notes. And Mike, until next time, and I'm sure we're going to have lots to talk about. next time, because in between then and now, CES 2018 is going to
Oh, yeah.
happen, and a lot of really cool products. So everyone, Mike Cermak, techout.org, check it out. And folks, in the meantime, tomorrow, join us on the program as we have on, let me get this straight, we're going to have on DinCloud. And they are a service, I believe we had them on before, about 6 to 8 months ago, where I think they provide cloud services and, you know, things like that for companies. And it's going to be a lot of fun. But everyone, tomorrow, DinCloud, today, Mike Cermak, thank you so much. And until next time, everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.